prestigious and upright the trading community, there was still that irresistible urge to tamper with the money, to sweat and clip the coins and make less metal do the work of more. The range and variety and quality of the coin available in Amsterdam was appalling. In 1606, the Dutch Parliament issued a manual for money changers. It listed no fewer than 846 different coins as being then in circulation. No one could now be certain, when he received a coin, what he was getting. It was to this problem of quality that the burghers of Amsterdam then addressed themselves. They created a bank owned by the city, and the bank solved the problem of the quality of coins by going back to weighing to decide how much metal of what purity was in the coins. In doing this, the town fathers pioneered the idea of public regulation of the money supply by a public bank. A merchant brought his wretched coins to the bank. The bank weighed them, scales like this. The deposit of the pure metal was then made to the merchant's account in the bank. This deposit was a highly reliable form of money. A merchant could transfer it to another merchant. The recipient knew that he was getting honest weight, that there was nothing funny. Then came the second discovery. The deposits that were so created did not need to be left idly in the bank. They could be lent. The bank then got interest, and the borrower had a deposit to his account that he could spend. But the original deposit still stood to the credit of the original depositor, and that too could be spent. No one should rub his or her eyes in amazement. Money, spendable money, had been created. Something that's still being done every day. And creation of money by a bank is as simple as that. The important thing is that the original depositor and the borrower must not come at the same time for their deposits, for their money. They must trust their bank. They must, in a sense, believe that the bank isn't doing what it is doing. The Dutch merchants have always been skilled in getting money and learned in its use. And after 1600, they used it to build one of the most beautiful cities of Europe and to support the arts. After Rembrandt moved here in 1631 to join the many artists who had preceded him, Amsterdam had a clear claim to be considered the center of the whole art world. Patronage of the arts, painting, architecture, urban design, proved that a family deserved the money that it possessed. It would be nice to attribute this prosperity and this flowering of the artistic spirit all to the Bank of Amsterdam. Bankers would applaud, and Chase Manhattan might even sponsor me on television. But as might be imagined, other factors were involved. Amsterdam was admirably situated on one of the outlets of the Rhine. It was also a tolerant place. Men who wanted to make money could do business here regardless of race, creed, or origin. And much of its prosperity was made by its Huguenots and Portuguese and Spanish Jews. This elegant house, by the way, is still owned by the Sixth family. The Sixth family were Huguenots by origin. Rembrandt was a friend of the family. His name still appears in an early guest book. And one of his great portraits, that of the first John VI, is still in this house. I said earlier that any monetary reform carries the seeds of its own abuse. So it was with the Bank of Amsterdam. One of the important borrowers from the bank was the Dutch East India Company. And in time, the East India Company fell on hard times. There was war with England, the ships did not come back, and loans went into default. Early in the last century, the depositors started coming to the Bank of Amsterdam for their money, and they couldn't be paid. And so it came about that in 1819, after 2 centuries of service, the affairs of the bank had to be wound up. By then, however, there was a much more spectacular example of how a bank could abuse the creation of money. The history now moves to Paris, more elegant, more theatrical, although not more beautiful than Amsterdam. Louis XIV, having lived too long, was now dead. His heir was only a boy. The realm had great debts and little money. The regent was incompetent, intellectually as well as financially bankrupt. Such men in such straits are open to persuasion, any promise of magic. What was needed was some magician who could transform the regent's debts into assets, or perform some similar feat of legerdemain. As it happens, a very accomplished rascal was available. So accomplished that some historians regret the word rascal. His name was John Law. These are his rooms in Paris. Law was the son of a well-to-do Edinburgh goldsmith who was also a banker. Goldsmiths in those days were often bankers because they had good strong boxes. He had come to Paris a few years before, not wholly by his own choice. He was wanted in England on a murder rap. He'd been unduly successful in a duel. In addition to dueling, he was an accomplished gambler. He was said to have met the regent in a gambling hall, and he had a genuinely innovative mind in other fields of finance. In 1716, Law got permission from the regent to establish a bank, the Bank Royal. This then took over the debts of the regent and those of the realm. These debts were then paid off with notes of the bank. This considerable endowment served Law's purposes in 2 ways. The notes that his bank were issuing were backed in principal by gold and silver. The needs of the regent being large, the note issue was also very large. By no stretch of the imagination was there enough gold and silver in France to redeem the notes. So the imagination was stretched to include Louisiana, where it was held. The gold and silver were available in unlimited supply, mountains of precious metals. The reality was wonderful in its way. Forests, swampland, rich farmland, great rivers, but unfortunately no gold. John Law was not deterred. He organized a company to conduct trade with this territory, the Company of the West, known ever since as the Mississippi Company. And the company held absolute title to all land from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada, from the Rockies east to the Alleghenies. An excellent piece of real estate.